Hey, Matt, thanks for joining me to talk about building science and data science. I appreciate you taking time to talk a little bit more deeply about this subject. We only have about 10 or 11 minutes to go deep on an area that really is new for our industry, right? So I thought maybe we'd go through a series of questions and answers, maybe share some slides to better illustrate and demonstrate what we're talking about. But when we talk about bridging the fields of building science and data science, can you start by explaining to our audience, in the world of building science, what we consider to be sophisticated building energy model that really underpins our whole discussion around bridging building science and data science?
Yeah, for sure, Beth. So building energy models are really unique for at least one critical aspect. They tell us the intent of the building performance based on physics, not based on any kind of statistics, based on actual physics. So they're really sophisticated digital versions, or what the term that gets thrown around a lot in the industry is a digital twin, that don't just represent the building, but it represents its total performance potential.
So building scientists spend a lot of time creating these models, right? They're very sophisticated, calibrating thermal zones, optimizing HVAC systems, and thinking about the relationship between the envelope and active systems. Are they just design tools? Are they essentially purpose today for work beyond design? Or what happens to those really sophisticated models once the key decisions are made for a building?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I've spent hours. This is one example of one of the building energy models that we've done. Um, and they can be really, really super sophisticated and really, really dialed in. But once that final report is written and whoever needs to review it has signed off on it, usually it kind of sits on the energy modeler server for a long time and never gets opened again. Typically, just as the building life is starting, the energy model gets closed up and never gets opened again.
Interesting. So I think maybe the million-dollar question is, do these digital assets have more to offer owners who have literally already paid for them? Do they have more to offer to building owners, facility managers during operations?
Oh, absolutely. Today, most buildings operate on two general contexts, right, to see how they're performing. The first context is how is my building doing compared to a similar building? We tend to compare our buildings to how other buildings are doing. Okay. The other way that our building performance gets understood is based on how the building performed last year or the year before. So sometimes that context can be misleading, but a building energy model can provide a really crucial third context point, and that's going to represent how the building was designed or intended to perform. And so when we integrate the building energy model data, all of a sudden our models kind of start having that extra purpose. And we can, what I like to call operationalize our energy models to give it that context is the building performing as designed, not as the building next door, not as how it did last year, but as it was intended to perform.
So when you take a model and you put it into a format that can be used in operations, is that something that is just valuable for a single building like this, or can it be equally or more valuable in a campus environment?
So campuses and portfolios get really, really interesting. So we can typically do a lot more with a campus or a portfolio of buildings with the building energy models because now instead of focusing on natural triggers of an individual building, we can focus our energy on the buildings that are underperforming or overperforming and not waste time or capital on areas of the building that's really not going to make a big difference in your overall operating costs of your portfolio. So what we can really hone in on is ensuring that every dollar spent is going to give you the best return in both performance and carbon reduction.
So on a campus environment, you could have some leaders thinking about where their next dollar is best spent, considering what they get back in terms of improved performance, reduced cost, and then that becomes a bit of a has a cascading effect, right? Because then you can continue to use what you reap from those investments for future investments.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so again, it's being able to repurpose those energy models that we've spent so much time and energy doing that has all of the data there. We just haven't had a really good way to merge the building performance data from an energy model with the actual building performance.
Can you explain how building energy models successfully bridge the gap between building science and data science?
So for decades, our industry has operated in two different worlds, right? We've got our building science models, which tells us what is possible. And then we've got our data science models that gives us all kinds of time series data, right? From your building automation systems to on-site meters to on-site sensors. There isn't necessarily a lack of data, but there is certainly a lack of context. How is the building performing? It's performing better than it did last year, right? The BAS system seems to be operating and functioning just fine. It's maybe one of my better performers in our portfolio, but I don't know if it's really operating at its real potential. The only way to know that is by the context of your energy model from the building scientists. AUROS Insights is a brand new data portal that's got all kinds of analytic capabilities. And what it's going to do, and what we kind of see on the screen here, is it's able to merge what we're getting from a BAS system, from on-site meters and sensors. And so we can see the top row of this slide here showing uh, building performance based on energy meters. Okay. We also see another level of context, historical invoices, right? Your utility bills in red. And so those have been historically maybe used. Maybe they're not trended. Maybe the calculations aren't done, but the data's there. But now what we can do is say, okay, this building is operating at a 62 EUI, kBTU per square foot per year. Is that good? That seems to be pretty good. Maybe it's the best performing building in our portfolio. But when we look at the meter or when we look at the simulation now in green, the building is capable of performing around a 52 or a 53. And why is there a difference there? And so the building energy model simulation can help us identify where the flaws are and how the building's being operated, or maybe the building is being used beyond what it was intended for, right? Higher occupancy, higher plug loads, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But either way, we can really help identify and give context to how the building is currently performing compared to how it was designed to perform.
So instead of just projecting forward using historical data on what the building might be capable of how a building might be capable of performing, using that context, you're saying, no, there's this other context. The building energy model says, but here's how it can perform, or here's how it designed and constructed to perform. It gives a different level of context that tells you good, bad, or indifferent.
Exactly. So the pieces have been around for a long time, right? Having done a lot of energy models, right? We're always gathering historical energy data, right? And seeing where the building is performing and building an energy model off of that. But bringing that simulation back in real time, okay, to a platform has not been around.
So it feels like there's a lot of automation potential. You can automate scope one, scope two emissions. We can automate the delivery of information. If somebody needs to have performance data transmitted in an automated way into Energy Star Portfolio Manager or to a funder or to a group that has third-party interest, that can all be done in an automated way, right?
Yeah, it's really an easy button for determining the highest return strategy for any building to reach its optimum performance potential. So whether that's for decarbonization efforts, whether that's meeting building performance standards, BPSs, whether that's targeting energy efficiency, whether that's targeting lowest operating cost or overall building resilience, all of those things, all of those efforts can benefit by overlaying your simulation with building performance.
So let's go to that use case and talk about the optimum
Yeah.
performance potential that really only for an existing building, only a building energy model can get after what that optimum performance potential is. So many data platforms that exist today either use historical data or comparable data and AI generated, right? A lot of AI or ML generated data to predict future performance. Why is that flawed thinking?
So one aspect of that that really gets ignored when you're looking at machine learning or AI generated potential is that's going to be based off of past performance. And when we're in a retrofit situation, we're kind of changing the equation.
And teams can choose to pursue two different approaches, right? You could get to an optimum performance potential in one step. Let's say everything's wrong with the building, it's dilapidated, all the triggers have hit at once, and somebody goes in and says, I'm doing this all at once. That is a single movement to get from current performance to an optimum performance potential. But as is the case with a lot of buildings, you can also take a phased approach and structure the changes based on triggers, right? Like you can have more thoughtful approach using either building performance and or budget as your constraints around what you want to do first, second, and third, right?
Yeah, for sure. So there are definitely, I would say multiple projects that benefit from a phased execution plan, which is what we're seeing on the screen here, compared to just doing it all at once. Most buildings can benefit from some sort of phased execution plan.
Yeah. So could you really quickly give everybody an idea of for a kind of standard building, standard commercial building, what's this worth? We hear all the time the envelope never pays. What's your take?
Yeah, so most of the time, there's an arbitrary percent better reduction that's being targeted. When you're thinking about that level of incrementalism, it's really challenging to get further than just replacing your mechanical system because the envelope isn't going to pay if you're only targeting 15% betterment. But when you are able to show using a building energy model that we can achieve 70 to 80% reduction, now all of a sudden the envelope is going to pay because your mechanical systems need to be smaller, overall building operation, consumption is going to reduce, and all of a sudden now we have tunneled through that cost barrier. So in existing buildings, the ability to simulate those deep performance potentials hasn't really been possible. So the incremental solution has always won because all we need to do is 15% better, and we've rung the bell. So what we see on this graph here is the red dotted line is showing annual energy costs to the year 2050, if it's built its operations as usual. And then if we're going to target that 15% betterment, maybe we're going to get down to that blue dotted line. And without the context of seeing how good the building could be, maybe the owner's going to think they rung the bell at $21 million savings. Okay. But what they're missing is that level of context, which is the green dotted line showing what the optimum decarbonization or energy efficiency potential of the building can be, which is they're leaving $23.5 million on the table over 25 years. If we were to max out renewable energy and perform our optimum decarbonization potential or energy efficiency potential, the owner's looking at almost $90 million in energy savings from 2025 to 2050.
And what triggers that is the changing the paradigm from incremental improvements to holistic improvements of being able to pull out 75 to 80% of energy consumption from an existing building.
Exactly. We're not targeting a percent better. We're going to see how good the building can be, and then we're going to let the owners see what that spectrum is and let them make the call as to whether or not the juice is worth the squeeze.
Yeah, right. So thanks, Matt. It feels like we're on the precipice of something big. I feel like we're unraveling an opportunity to blend deterministic and probabilistic modeling that reduces the risk of investing and better predicts the outcomes, which in both cases have to be so valuable to owners, and it could be a game changer.
Yeah, so owners now have the chance to put their most trusted advisors, right, the building scientists and engineers on their team, to be directly involved in developing these plans that are going to deliver the highest performing building at the lowest possible cost.
It's outstanding. Hey, thanks for your time today. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, Beth, anytime.